You know the Japanese sword, the katana. It's this global icon of pure perfection, right? People talk about its legendary sharpness, its impossible strength. It's really more than just a weapon. It's art. It's the soul of the warrior. But what if I told you that this incredible symbol of perfection was actually born from a massive, fundamental flaw? To really get the sword, you have to get the science behind it. And honestly, it's mind-blowing. These smiths weren't just banging on metal. They were practical metallurgists, manipulating steel at a molecular level, hundreds of years before anyone even knew what a molecule was. They were solving this incredibly complex engineering puzzle with nothing more than fire, a hammer, and just this unbelievable intuition. So, how in the world did they pull it off? How did they create a blade that was both ridiculously hard and incredibly tough? Two qualities that are, usually total opposites in the world of metal. Well, the answer isn't in what they had, it's in what they didn't have. Now, you'd think to forge the greatest sword in the world, you'd start with the world's best iron, right? Well, the foundation for this legendary weapon was, let's be honest, it was terrible. And this is where our story really gets interesting. Okay, just look at the scale of the problem here. Most of the world's best steel came from high-quality rock ore that was just packed with iron. But Japanese smiths, they had to work with something called satatsu, iron sand. And it contained a measly 2 to 5% iron. They were literally starting with one of the worst raw materials on the entire planet. This should have been a complete deal breaker, but instead, it became the spark for pure genius. Because they couldn't find better material, they had no choice but to invent a better method. They developed this amazingly complex, painstaking process where every single step was a direct solution to the problems of their terrible iron sand. And it all starts here, with a Tatara furnace. Now, unlike the big European blast furnaces that completely liquefied the ore, the Tatara just couldn't get that hot. Instead, it would sort of cook the iron sand for 3 days straight, creating this spongy, semi-solid blob of steel. Now get this, that flaw, the fact that it couldn't fully melt the iron, was actually the first secret to their success. So because the Tatara didn't melt everything down into a uniform soup, the steel it produced, called Tamahagane or jewel steel, was super inconsistent. It was this jumbled mix of hard, brittle, high-carbon bits and soft, flexible, low-carbon bits. But instead of seeing this as a defect, the smiths saw it as a palette of materials. They'd literally break the whole thing apart and meticulously sort the pieces by hand, separating the hard from the soft. So this is the journey, from crummy sand to a flawless blade. Each of these steps is just a masterclass in problem solving. They smelt the inconsistent steel, they sort it into its useful parts, they fold it over and over to purify it, laminate it to combine its strengths, and then, in a flash of fire and water, they quench it, locking its soul into place. And now we get to the most famous part, the folding. The smith heats, hammers, and folds a piece of steel onto itself again and again and again, up to 16 times. Think of it like kneading dough. With every fold, you're squeezing out the little air pockets, the impurities, and making the final loaf stronger and more consistent. This does two critical things. It physically hammers out all the junk from the original sand, and it spreads the carbon evenly throughout the steel. That faint, beautiful pattern you see on a finished blade, that's the hara, and it's the visible proof of those thousands of layers. But here's the thing. A blade that's hard all the way through is also brittle. It could shatter on impact. And this led to their most brilliant idea of all. They built a composite blade. The smiths would take that hard, high-carbon steel, the kawagane, and forge weld it like a jacket around a soft, flexible core of low-carbon steel, the shingane. It's the ultimate engineering trade-off. You get a razor-sharp, wear-resistant edge wrapped around a shock-absorbing, basically unbreakable spine. And this brings us to the final, almost magical step. Before hardening the blade, the smith paints it with a special clay mixture. He puts a thin layer on the edge and a much thicker layer on the spine. Then the blade is heated to a perfect glowing temperature and plunged into water. This is called quenching. The thin clay on the edge lets it cool almost instantly, making it incredibly hard. But the thick clay on the spine insulates it, so it cools much slower, staying soft and flexible. And it's that very difference in cooling speeds that forces the once straight blade to bend into its iconic, graceful curve. And the proof of this incredible process? It's right there on the blade for everyone to see. That beautiful, wavy line is called the hamon. And it's not just for decoration. That line is the actual, visible boundary between the hard martensite steel of the edge and the softer pearlite steel of the spine. The hamon is like the fingerprint of the sword's soul. It's the physical evidence of its dual nature. This entire process was so incredible, it elevated swordsmithing from just a craft into a true art form. And during Japan's feudal era, this art hit its absolute peak, with different regions developing their own unique styles and even philosophies about the blade. So you had the 5 great traditions, the Gokaden. The Yamato school, for example, made these really robust blades for warrior monks. The Yamashiro school style was more elegant, super popular with the aristocrats in Kyoto. The Bizen school was a powerhouse, practically mass-producing swords. And then you had the Soshu school, home to some absolute legends, known for this powerful, almost flamboyant style. So this wasn't just one tradition. It was this rich, diverse ecosystem of high art. And out of these schools came actual legends. You know, the most famous rivalry is between Masamune and Muramasa. Masamune was seen as this enlightened master artist. His blades were considered these perfectly balanced spiritual objects. Muramasa, on the other hand, he made blades of terrifying sharpness, and they gained this reputation for being cursed or bloodthirsty, supposedly driving their owners to violence. It's really the perfect metaphor for the sword itself, a divine work of art that also happens to be an unbelievably deadly weapon. For centuries, this tradition just thrived. But then, history happened. A massive change swept across society that threatened to completely wipe out the art of the swordsmith forever. In 1876, the government passed something called the Hitori Edict, and just like that, carrying swords in public was illegal. The samurai class was dissolved, and with them, the demand for their iconic weapon just vanished, pretty much overnight. The swordsmith's entire market, their reason for being, was gone. So what happened to all these master craftsmen? Did centuries of knowledge just disappear? No way. Facing total extinction, they did what their ancestors had always done. They adapted. They took every single lesson they had learned from forging the perfect sword and applied it to a new purpose, creating the world's best cutting tools for everyday life, especially kitchen knives. And this is the part of the story that comes crashing right into our modern world, and maybe even right into your own home. You see, the soul of the samurai sword didn't die. It was just reborn. Seriously, the next time you see a high-end Japanese kitchen knife, look closely. That laminated steel, sometimes with that beautiful wavy Damascus pattern, that's a direct descendant of the Kawagane and Shingane composite blade. The fact that it holds an edge forever, that comes from the same hardening techniques used to create the hamon. And that razor-sharp chisel-like edge, the geometry is taken straight from the sword. It is literally samurai DNA right there in your kitchen drawer. And today, that legacy is carried on by brands that are famous all over the world. A brand like Shun brought this amazing precision into Western kitchens. Miyabi blends German engineering with Japanese craft, and Masamoto is still the absolute gold standard for sushi chefs who demand nothing less than perfection. Each and every one is a continuation of a story that started with just a handful of sand. So if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. The Japanese sword is a masterpiece, not in spite of its flawed origins, but because of them. The awful quality of that iron sand forced generations of artisans into this relentless, obsessive pursuit of perfection. And in doing so, they created a process more complex, more ingenious, and ultimately more beautiful than anywhere else on Earth. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? True excellence isn't about getting the perfect starting materials. It's about the brilliant, creative, patient struggle to turn your limitations into your greatest strengths. So, what other marvels of human ingenuity born from necessity are hiding in plain sight all around us?